Over 1 million children are killed in the USA alone every year. It is the most challenging debate I have ever come across. It is 1:20. Hey Jack and Wilson, thank you for this amazing deep dive, which is surely thought-provoking for all of us, no matter if you're an American citizen or not. Hey everyone, this is Cleofy again from the Cleofy podcast. I am sure you will like the deep dive as well. If you do, click the like button and subscribe as well, because most of you don't subscribe, unfortunately. Yeah, over 85% don't subscribe to the channel, which really hurts me. I and my team bring a debate and deep dive on almost a daily basis, which costs time and money as well. Let's listen to the deep dive.
Welcome to the deep dive. Here we take your sources and really work to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, insights tailored for you.
Well, that's the goal.
Today, we're diving deep into, well, a pretty intense discussion from a recent YouTube video. It's called, Can 25 Liberal College Students Outsmart One Conservative? Feat. Charlie Kirk, Surrounded.
Right. Quite the title.
Yeah, and our mission here is really to cut through some of the noise. We want to help you understand the core arguments, maybe some surprising facts, and especially these clashing definitions that came up.
Absolutely. Definitions seemed key here.
Between the students and the conservative figure, yeah. On some really hot-button topics, we're definitely not taking sides. Just trying to help you see the different perspectives, the points they actually used.
Exactly. Laying out how they built their cases.
So what did we really learn about, public discourse from watching this exchange? What's the takeaway?
Well, what immediately jumps out, I think, is how often these debates, these really intense ones, seem to hinge on fundamental definitions and even how people interpret the same facts.
Cool.
So we'll be looking at how both sides frame things, what evidence they actually presented, and crucially, where their understanding of key terms just, diverged.
Right.
And it really makes you think, in this age of just information everywhere, how do we evaluate these deeply held beliefs when they clash head-on like this?
A big question. So let's dive in. First topic, abortion. And it immediately got into definitions, didn't it?
Straight away.
One speaker defined abortion as the forcible ending of the viability of a being in utero, otherwise known as a fetus.
Quite a specific phrasing.
Yeah. And then murder was defined as the intentional taking of life different than killing or sudden death, and later clarified as the unjustified termination of a human life. The language itself sets a tone.
Definitely. And then a student jumped in, identified as Catholic, and brought in this really interesting distinction. They personally felt it was murder.
Okay.
I apologize for interrupting the deep dive. Are you or someone you know struggling to land a job? Check out the ATS Resume Optimizer. I created this tool myself, and for just $5 a month, you get unlimited tailored resumes, mock interview prep, and a resume health score to boost your chances. Transform your job search today. Link in the description. Let's get back to the deep dive.
Okay. But then immediately said, I don't believe in telling people what to do with their bodies.
So that classic tension, personal belief versus individual autonomy.
Exactly. Right from the start. And they emphasized what they saw as a big difference between cells in utero than a living, breathing, existing being. That framed the core disagreement right there.
Okay, so cells versus living being. And this led straight into viability versus moral worth, right?
Precisely. A student just flat out said, viability and moral worth are two different things.
Okay.
But the conservative speaker countered that. They brought up the youngest ever surviving fetus, 20 weeks, I think it was, in San Diego.
Right, I saw that.
And contrasted that with the statistic that 93% of abortions happened in the first 13 weeks of pregnancy.
So well before that 20-week mark.
Way before. Which raises the question, well, how significant is viability if most abortions happen much earlier?
Good point. And the definitions got even more tangled, didn't they, with the parasite analogy? Oh, yeah. That really intensified things. The student classified a fetus as, quote, technically classified as a parasite until it is viable.
And defined parasite as?
As something that cannot survive outside its host, purely based on dependence.
Okay. And the response?
The speaker challenged that definition, asked if, a 4-month-old baby needing help or elderly people with dementia, are they also parasites by that logic?
Right. Pushing the definition.
And the student differentiated, said a 4-month-old can breathe on its own, can drink water, pointing to basic physical functions as the difference.
It's really about where you draw the line on independent survival.
It is. And the speaker kept pressing on dependence, saying a mother can survive without the baby in her, but the baby cannot survive without the mom.
And then the DNA argument came in.
Yeah, the student countered with, a mom cannot survive without her lungs, so it's not her body, it's in her body. And then the key part, it's not her DNA, so it's not her choice, adding it's, well, only 50% her DNA.
Wow. So biological reality versus autonomy again. It shows just how complex applying these definitions gets.
It really does. You zoom out, and it's clear these arguments are just rooted in fundamentally different biological and, frankly, moral interpretations of personhood connection.
Right?
And then the conversation pivoted slightly, didn't it, to IUDs and Plan B.
Yeah. A student asked, well, if IUDs can prevent implantation of a conceived zygote, does that make women who use them murderers? Pushing the logic.
A direct challenge. And the speaker drew a line there, said preventing implantation isn't the same as terminating a, quote, fully fertilized being.
But there was a caveat.
There was. They conceded that if someone knew a fertilized egg existed and then took a drug specifically to stop it attaching, then yes, that is an act of killing or murder.
Okay, so intent and knowledge matter there.
Yeah.
And what about punishment?
That was interesting. The conservative speaker argued women who had abortions or used IUDs shouldn't go to jail. Why? Because they've been, quote, deceived by mass culture and mass propaganda.
Ah, so shifting blame.
To some extent. But they were very clear that the abortionists should go to jail and then use some very graphic descriptions of procedures.
Yeah, I noted those. Very graphic, breaking babies' backs, things like that. A clear line on who they see as culpable.
Absolutely. It raises big questions about legal responsibility, moral agency, the role of societal influence.
Definitely. And the debate also got into those tough cases, the exceptions. A student asked about the mother's life being in danger.
And the response was to suggest a C-section as a much safer alternative. And they also mentioned this idea of a growing consensus in the pro-life world that abortion is never medically necessary.
Okay, challenging the life of the mother exception directly.
It seems so, which, has huge real-world implications. Another student brought up the practical difficulties women being forced to travel hundreds of miles for care, even after rape or incest.
Right, the access issue. And the numbers came up too.
Yeah, the conservative speaker claimed 4,000 abortions a day in the U.S. and said after Roe v. Wade was overturned, rates went down dramatically in Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, citing specific states.
But a student pushed back on that, didn't they?
They did. Argued that making it illegal doesn't actually decrease the amount of abortions that happen because, well, illegal abortions still happen, shifting the focus from legal counts to overall occurrence, safe or unsafe.
So a fundamental disagreement on the actual effect of bans?
Exactly. One side sees legal numbers dropping, the other sees a shift to potentially dangerous procedures. And then the discussion turned to reducing abortions.
What were the proposed solutions?
A student suggested proper sex education,
Right.
but the conservative speaker immediately countered that, said, we have increased sex education in the last 30 years. We've had basically arguing that our sex education is so bad in America, it actually leads things in, quote, negative directions.
So not only ineffective, but potentially harmful in their view.
That was the claim, which leads into the whole when does life begin, territory, sentience.
Right. A student mentioned seeing brainwaves around 6 to 8 weeks.
Yep. And the speaker drew a parallel, maybe a challenging one, to brain-dead individuals who also have brainwaves.
Okay, but what was the distinction they made?
The likelihood of those brainwaves increasing versus decreasing, potentiality versus decline, basically.
Ah, interesting angle. Trying to distinguish potential life from residual activity.
It seemed that way. And interestingly, a student then suggested a ban after 18 through 26 weeks.
And the reaction.
The speaker called that a more reasonable position, even compared it to Trump's 15 weeks, hinting at maybe some common ground on later term limits.
A potential area of compromise, maybe. But then it got very difficult again. The 10-year-old rape victim scenario.
Yeah, that was incredibly stark. The speaker's response was unequivocal. The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered, stating flatly, how you were conceived is irrelevant to what human rights you get.
Focusing entirely on the fetus's rights based on conception.
Completely. But then another student immediately shifted the focus, saying they weren't talking about the cells or the fetus, but the person who is dealing with the pregnancy.
That's a huge shift. From the biological entity inside to the person experiencing it all.
It really is. And it just highlights how the lens you choose, fetus-centric versus person-centric, fundamentally changes the entire shape of the argument.
Absolutely. Okay, so from those incredibly personal definitions of life, the discussion took quite a sharp turn, didn't it, into higher education?
Yeah, asking that big question, is college a scam?
A question on a lot of people's minds, I bet. They started by defining terms again. College meant.
Traditional four-year college, university, not community college or technical college. Getting
A
specific.
scam.
Defined as a situation where a majority of people are not getting their money's worth, their time's worth, and they're being deceived when they sign up.
Okay, so a high bar. Majority not getting value plus deception.
That's the definition they set up, and then the purpose of college itself was debated.
What were the views?
The conservative speaker argued it should be about traditional liberal arts, the pursuit of what is good, true, and beautiful, but also, importantly, preparing one for the job market.
Kind of a dual purpose. Intellectual and practical.
Well, a student agreed with the self-betterment part, the betterment of yourself, but added the betterment of society, and specifically mentioned majors like history that may not make as much money, but still contribute.
So a broader societal value versus individual or job market value.
Exactly. Which led, perhaps inevitably, to gender studies.
Ah, yes, that came up.
The speaker directly questioned if getting a degree in gender studies is good for society. Claimed things like learning that men can give birth is not exactly a good use of time, and cited the CDC using birthing person.
So challenging the content and societal utility of the field.
Pretty directly. But a student defended it, saying essentially, why does it matter if 10 people want to be a gender studies major and it matters to them? Arguing for individual choice.
And they also made a practical argument, right? Pre-law.
They did. Suggested it could be a pre-law track, arguing lawyers need to understand how the law isn't inadvertently affected by social, cultural, and gender norms, giving it a professional pathway.
Okay, but the counter was about numbers.
Yeah, the speaker pointed out that less than 5% of all people that go to college end up studying medicine or in legal. The vast majority, they claimed, go into soft social sciences, communications with the humanities.
Implying those degrees have less clear societal or economic value, perhaps.
That seemed to be the implication, which connects directly to the job market argument.
Right. The speaker asserted that a majority of kids that exit college will not use their degree at all when they go to find a job.
Pretty bold claim.
And they highlighted alternatives. Said there are 11 million jobs open right now that don't require a college degree.
Pointing to trades specifically. Plumbers, welders, electricians. Mentioned apprenticeships, no 4-year degree needed, and an entrance salary, $80,000 a year.
Presenting a very different, potentially lucrative path.
Exactly. But a student countered with statistics, arguing most jobs offer intent to pay if you have a degree, and that 86% of people with a degree get paid more than those with just high school.
Okay, the standard earnings premium argument.
But the speaker immediately qualified that statistic. Said it's only true if you count the ones at the top 10% of income earners, like doctors and lawyers.
Ah, so arguing the average is skewed by the very top earners.
Right. Implying that for the majority in those soft fields, the financial advantage might be much less clear or even non-existent compared to skilled trades.
Interesting statistical point. And then the conversation touched on graduation rates and pressure.
Yeah, the speaker noted the national graduation rate is 59%, which is, well, not great, suggesting maybe we're probably sending too many kids into this institution.
Questioning the fit for everyone.
And they talked about the pressures, guidance counselors, parents community, federal subsidies, all creating this expectation if you grow up in a upper middle class home to go to college.
That societal conveyor belt idea.
Pretty much. But then a student pushed back on that, placing the responsibility firmly on the individual. It's up to the person, they said. You can't just go to college and expect to come out with a degree. You have to put the work in.
Right, emphasizing personal effort and accountability for the outcome.
Yeah, a different perspective on why some might not succeed or find value.
Okay, so from the value of education, the debate then shifted again, this time to identity. Deeply personal. What is a woman?
Another definitional flashpoint. The conservative speaker's definition was very specific. An adult female of XX chromosomes. Purely biological.
Okay, and the student response.
Immediate counter. One said, somebody who identifies as a woman. Repeated it later. Another argued, you can't define a woman just by her chromosomes. Women are so much more than that.
So biology versus identity laid out very clearly.
Absolutely. The fundamental disagreement. And intersex individuals came up.
How were these discussed?
A student described conditions like XXY or XD as natural mutations upon the binary, acknowledging biology but framing it as variation.
And the speaker's take.
acknowledged they exist, but called them mutations of a binary, reinforcing the two-sex model, and made the point that there's never been a case of someone who can impregnate themselves, emphasizing reproductive roles.
Sticking to a biological binary based on reproduction. Then there was that striking comment from a student about their trans friend.
Yeah, that was remarkable. They said, my best friend is trans, and I would say that she's more of a woman than I am.
And the explanation was?
It wasn't about biology or identity in the usual sense. It was about character. I think she's a better person than me. I think she lives women are better people, equating womanhood with certain positive human qualities.
That's a very different definition, almost philosophical.
It really pushes the boundaries. And another student offered a more sociological definition. A woman is an adult human person that has a desire to be in accordance with a particular set of social and cultural norms that are typically associated with a female sex.
Okay, so linking it to social roles and norms.
Right. And the speaker challenged that directly, asked if there's nothing inherent about having a period or being able to give birth or the specific hormonal makeup. Is it all social?
And the student's answer?
Correct. A flat assertion that yes, it's all socially constructed.
Wow. Which led to the sex versus gender distinction.
Exactly. A student explicitly differentiated sex, which is a biological aspect, and what gender is, which is a social construct.
And the speaker's response to that concept?
I reject gender completely as a different word. That's where the debate is. It's the existence of gender, rejecting the entire concept of gender as separate from biological sex.
So the core disagreement isn't just how to define woman, but whether gender as a concept separate from sex even exists or is valid.
That's exactly what it boiled down to, which naturally leads to practical implications,
Yeah.
sports being a major one.
Right. How did that play out?
The speaker argued for fairness based on biology, said the most fair categorization is male sports and female sports because of inherent physical differences. Body composition, bone mass, long-density testosterone and estrogen rates.
Citing biology as the key factor for fairness in competition.
Yes, and pointed to history, the ancient Olympics excluding women, rules changing later arguing for a historical precedent of sex-segregated sports.
But the student view?
A student argued inclusivity was paramount. We still have to allow all people that are women in the women's category. That includes CIS and trans.
Okay, inclusion first. But what about fairness concerns?
They suggested if it is deemed unfair, then society can decide hormones as the basis for categories, shifting the criteria away from identity or sex chromosomes, perhaps.
So proposing hormones as a potential arbiter. And the Leah Thomas example came up.
It did. The swimmer at UPenn, bringing the abstract debate right into a concrete, controversial, real-world case.
Yeah, that certainly grounds the discussion. Okay, shifting gears again, but still touching on identity politics. Kamala Harris. Was she framed as a DEI candidate?
That was the explicit claim from the conservative speaker, that she is a DEI candidate because she's black and she's a woman.
And the reasoning?
That Joe Biden had promised that criteria for his VP pick, and therefore the implication was she was not chosen because of her intellect or her accomplishments. Identity over merit was the charge.
Okay. How did the students respond to that framing?
One student called the underlying argument the idea of a super qualified white man who was overpassed by this unqualified, stupid, idiot person of color, a terrible analogy, rejecting the premise.
And they offered a different definition of DEI.
Another student did, yeah. Defined DEI as giving people of color the opportunity to be welcomed into spaces in which they typically aren't able to get, framing it as opening doors, creating opportunity.
So opportunity expansion versus identity-based selection.
Yeah.
Two very different views of DEI itself.
Fundamentally different, and the debate then swung towards Harris's actual competence or perceived competence.
What points were made there?
The speaker brought up Amy Klobuchar, suggesting vetting at the time indicated Klobuchar would have been a better VP, and claimed, though without showing them, that Biden's own vetting documents show Kamala Harris wasn't very smart, wasn't very bright.
Okay. Citing alleged internal documents to question competence.
Right. Then the discussion turned to her actual record. The speaker claimed she polled terribly initially, completely destroyed the Republican Party within like 2 weeks. That seemed sarcastic or mistaken, maybe.
Okay.
But another student went after her record directly, calling it abysmal. Cited rising crime, homelessness, arson in San Francisco when she was DA, and later as AG of California, implying poor performance in previous roles.
So specific criticisms of her track record.
Yes. But then, fascinatingly, a student asserted that competency can't be objectively determined.
That's a radical claim. It challenges the whole basis of evaluating qualifications.
It really does. If competency is purely subjective, how do you even have these debates? Then the speaker questioned her visibility as VP. She refuses to talk to the press. Not one sit-down interview in nearly 25 days.
Reason questions about accessibility and engagement.
And when a student was asked for her greatest accomplishment as VP, the initial answer was symbolic, being the first female all-black president. Correcting to VP, obviously.
Right.
Then they conceded, vice presidents don't really do much, to be honest, underscoring that gap between symbolic representation and substantive action, perhaps.
Interesting concession. And the DEI discussion broadened out.
It did. The speaker used the example of United Airlines policy aiming for half of all their new hires are going to be black or women.
And the concern.
I want to know my pilot is there because they're a good pilot, not because they fit some DEI box. Connecting the political DEI argument to safety and meritocracy in the private sector.
Okay. And then came that unexpected comparison to the Senate.
Yeah, that was a curveball. A student argued the Senate itself is technically DEI in a certain sense, because small states like Wyoming get disproportionate power, a greater vote than in California.
Comparing state representation to diversity initiatives.
Exactly. But the speaker immediately countered, that's not DEI, that's federalism, a constitutional principle for state representation, not an identity-based program, highlighting the difference between structural representation and DEI as they understood it.
Right, invoking a different principle, federalism, to explain the Senate structure, shows how the same outcome can be framed differently. Okay, let's tackle the final major topic, affirmative action.
And historical injustice, yeah. Big one. A student started by asserting affirmative action is constitutional and is a right that certain American citizens deserve.
A strong claim.
Yeah.
Constitutional and a deserved right.
Very strong. The counter from the speaker was rooted in the 14th Amendment. They argued it guarantees equal protection regardless of race, calling it a colorblind amendment. And that the whole point of affirmative action, giving an extra boost based on their skin color, by definition, cuts underneath the idea of equal protection, arguing it inherently violates colorblind equality.
So, a direct clash on the interpretation of the 14th Amendment. Colorblind versus race-conscious remedies.
Precisely. And then they got into the historical context. Acknowledging the timeline, slavery, Jim Crow starting in 1877, lack of equal rights officially until 1965.
Playing out the history.
And a student explicitly argued that because of Jim Crow laws, black people were significantly hindered from economic advancement. A direct causal link from history to present disparity.
Makes sense. But the speaker challenged that linkage.
Surprisingly, yes. Contended that the data shows not really hindered. Asserted that, in fact, black Americans are poor today in 2024 than they were in the 1950s.
Wow. That challenges a very common narrative. What explanation was offered for that claim?
They offered several factors for the current situation. Number one, they claimed, was the disappearance of the black father. Cited a statistic, 75% of black youth are not raised with a father in the home now, versus 25% in the 1950s.
Okay, focusing on family structure. What else?
Also mentioned public sector teacher unions and the war on police in our inner cities. So a mix of cultural and maybe policy factors contributing to current problems in their view.
A multi-pronged explanation, shifting focus from historical discrimination as the primary driver today.
Exactly. But a student immediately brought up the war on drugs, arguing it created an epidemic of mass incarceration specifically for black men, pointing to policy with disparate racial impact.
Right, another major factor often cited.
The speaker countered that by citing crime stats. Blacks are 13% of the population, and they commit 58% of all the murders. Asserted, that's not a war on drugs, that's a culture problem, shifting blame back to internal community factors.
Very direct. But the historical argument wasn't dropped, was it?
Not at all. A student emphasized 10 generations of legislative subjugation and slavery, mentioned lynchings, 4,000 black men, women, and children, and crucially, brought up redlining federally mandated or sustained by the FHA.
The housing discrimination aspect.
Yes. Arguing this made black Americans incapable of buying homes and putting equity into neighborhoods with lower crime rates and better educational systems. A clear argument for long-lasting systemic institutional barriers created by past policy.
Connecting past discrimination directly to present wealth and opportunity gaps through housing.
A powerful connection. The speaker then concluded their point by mentioning the money spent. We've spent $20 trillion on uplifting Black community through programs like the Great Society.
Okay, bringing up government spending.
Right, but arguing that despite the spending, Black America is poorer, more murderous, more dangerous now, suggesting those programs failed or were perhaps counterproductive.
Questioning the efficacy of large-scale government intervention.
Exactly, and a student's final response to that was very telling. We are not asking for handouts, we are asking for equity.
Equity, not handouts, but the definition of equity itself was contested.
Immediately. The speaker defined equity as taking from other people, but the student clarified it means sharing.
Wow. Ending on another fundamental definitional disagreement. Equity as redistribution versus equity as fair sharing or opportunity.
Perfectly encapsulates the deep divides we saw throughout the entire discussion.
What an incredibly intense and really thought-provoking deep dive. We've unpacked so much here, from life and womanhood definitions to college, social policy, history.
It covered a huge amount of ground.
And it's just so clear, isn't it? Even when people are looking at the same facts or the same history, how they define their terms, how they interpret things, the values they prioritize, it leads to completely different conclusions, often conclusions that seem totally irreconcilable.
Absolutely. And if you zoom out, what these sources really reveal is how our, personal beliefs, our identities, these broader societal ideas or constructs, they all get tangled up with what we each consider to be objective truth, which leaves a really important question for you, the listener, to maybe think about. How do your own definitions, your own understanding of these really fundamental concepts, life, fairness, identity, college, whatever it is, how do those shape your view of the world? And what might you discover if you just paused, maybe on a debate you feel strongly about, and really considered the foundational definitions that are driving the disagreement? You might find the root is different than you thought.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've gained some valuable insights. If you're a truth seeker, yearning for divine light and ready to step out of darkness, now is your moment. The truth is that Allah is the one and only creator of the universe. He has sent over 124,000 messengers and prophets to guide humanity, starting with Adam and culminating with the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. If you resonate with this message, you might be ready to embrace Islam. Simply recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. For further support, feel free to join our WhatsApp group. You can send us a private message there. The link is in the video description. Don't wait until it's too late. We look forward to connecting with you soon.